Hi, Leah.
Hey, Jocelyn.
I am so excited that you're here today on Confidence Conversations with me.
My gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, so let's dive in with what confidence means to you.
Absolutely. Such a great question, and one that has changed for me over the years. Confidence to me now really is about going inward.
Mm,
It's really about being authentically who I am, no matter what room I'm in or what people that I'm around, and always really staying true to my core values that I've spent a lot of time figuring out what those are to me over the years. And I think when you have that foundation about what you truly believe in versus maybe what other people want you to believe in or what our culture wants us to believe in, that really helps you develop a really strong sense of self so that that confidence can come through.
yeah, I like that you said, regardless of whatever room you're in, you uphold your same values because at a fundamental core, we believe what we believe, right? But our ability to express that and advocate for ourselves changes sometimes if we lack that sense of confidence in ourselves. And so there may be the tendency to shrink or to shy away
Mhm.
from expressing our viewpoints or intents when we're in certain rooms.
Exactly. And maybe even too, knowing yourself well enough to know that maybe there are some rooms that you don't want to be in. Because to your point, maybe those rooms will make you shrink. And so
Mhm.
knowing yourself in a way that it gives you the opportunity to say a lot of yeses to things that really align with you. And then also giving yourself the confidence to say no and not always feeling like you have to do something. I know that's something for myself I've experienced a lot recently with, just saying no to certain events or things that I just really don't want to attend because they don't feel good to me. And that can actually take a lot of confidence to be able to say no as well.
Owning your no is so powerful because by saying yes to everything, we're automatically by default saying no to something else in our lives. And we want to make sure that that thing we're saying no to by saying yes isn't ourselves and our authenticity. So, how did you get to that place of being able to say, you know what, that's not for me. I'm not going to do it. No.
Yeah, it took a lot of work, honestly. Inward work on myself, and of course, working with therapists and coaches and mentors along the way. And if I were to go back in time, I can really see it stemming from family and always having this mentality of you have to be at every single event and not feeling like you had a choice either. And eventually coming into adulthood and being like, I don't really know that extended family member all that well. And I don't know if I want to give up my Saturday.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I've never thought of it in that way, but like as children, we don't really have the ability to say yes or no to what we go to.
Yeah.
And if we don't really get intentional about evaluating that as we get older, we just do things by default. We never really tap into that autonomy to be
Yeah.
like, I actually have the power to say no now. My parents aren't deciding for me and understanding what it is that I value and how I want to spend my time. And is what I'm doing actually aligned with that?
Yes. I actually had a friend a year or two ago. We were out on a walk and she's a little bit younger than I am and is definitely in the season of engagements and weddings and babies and all that stuff. And she said to me, she goes, "You only get one event from me. So if you're someone who's getting married and you're having an engagement party, a bridal shower, a bachelorette party, and a wedding," she was like, "You get one. Which one do you want me at?" And I loved that. And it's a little bit extreme, but I
Yeah.
think the intent behind it is really powerful because you're giving so much energy away to other people all the time. And she had this really beautiful way of looking at it that, yes, I want to give some of that energy to you, but I also have a boundary within myself to know that that's too much overextension for me. And I'm going to choose which events really matter the most.
Yeah. I
So
think it's important because we want to, at some core, we like as human beings, we want to be accepted. And
Yes.
a part of being accepted is like going with formalities and doing the things that we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to say, all right, I'm going to do these things, but you have to tell me like what is your priority, I think is a huge and bold statement.
Yeah.
And I'm like wondering how your friend got to that point. Because I
I
know
know, right?
I'm sick. I
Right. You'll have to have a conversation with her. I'll put you in touch. But for me, I think I am somebody who grew up as a rule follower and still am, that to some varying degrees. It just sort of was embedded in me. And what's interesting too is I was actually given a lot of freedom as a child. I was kind of, I wouldn't say like left to my own devices, but I just had a lot of room to explore on my own and accomplish things on my own. And for that reason, the way that I grew up was sort of like always doing what the teachers asked, always getting my assignments done on time. And that really carried through. And at some point in my late 20s, early 30s, that started to switch. And it happened after I was let go from a job. And that, if we're talking about confidence, I mean, that just shook my entire life apart. And it completely shattered my confidence, because up until that point, I had been following the rules and I had been doing everything I was supposed to, graduated with honors, and had landed what I thought was my dream job, and had been reviewed the year before, and everything was good. And then I was just sort of blindsided. And I didn't speak up. I didn't have a voice. I just, at that time in my life, kind of accepted what I was being told and had all of these other thoughts going through my mind as soon as I worked at a school as a school guidance counselor, actually. And of course, now it's like a blessing in disguise. You just don't know it then. But I was young. I had got the job when I was 24. And by the time I was let go, I was 27. And I just didn't even think that I could ask questions.
mm-hmm.
I didn't even think I could ask why. I just took it and was like, okay. And the way that the school system worked, I actually had to stay till the end of the year. They had told me in December. So like, imagine landing what you think is your dream job, being told everything's great, having the rug pulled out from under you, and we still need you to be here for another 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
And after that, it was like, oh my God, did I choose the wrong career path? What am I supposed to do now? Should I even be applying to other schools and continue this path? Because these people didn't believe I could do it. So do I even believe that I could do it? So it took a lot. And there was a ton of shame and a ton of guilt that I had around being fired. I mean, I couldn't even say the words I was fired until a few years ago. I was, it wasn't the right fit. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I had all these excuses because I was so embarrassed, right? Like I worked so hard. My parents supported me financially to get graduate degrees. And then all of a sudden it's like, I wasn't good enough.
Right. So tell me about how finally being able to own your story enabled you or empowered you to be able to live a self-actualized life.
Yeah. Did not happen overnight, for sure. It took some time. And I had a few other life moments that really kind of shook me to my core as well. And one of them, which I think is a really important part of my story too, is being in a relationship with somebody who was living a double life and not knowing. And when I found that out, it was like reliving that moment of being let go all over again. Same thoughts, same narratives, why me? Was I not good enough? How could this happen to me? I put so much time and effort into this, and now it's completely blown up in my face. And those two events combined were enough to really have me stop and look at my life and the direction that it was going in. And what did I really want to do? And when the relationship ended, which was years later after I had been let go, I had been in a different career at that point. It was one of those moments where I was like, this is so intense, what I'm going through and what I'm feeling. And I know it's going to take a lot of time for me to heal from this. So I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm just going to kind of put my head down and not make any major life decisions until I start to really get re-regulated, understand myself a little bit better, and really start to heal myself from the inside out. And so that's really what began the self-actualizing work and starting to rebuild the confidence, right? And get rid of those narratives and those stories. And it's not easy. It can be a really ugly journey to have to look at yourself and recognize the roles that you might have played, you know, where your patterns started, where your own narrative started, and how to combat them and start to really rewire the way you think and interrupting those patterns that your brain has had for decades. Right. And what worked so well for me was spending time in nature and spending time with animals.
Yeah.
They see me for who I am. And that was a critical part of how I got to where I am today. My dog got me out of bed in the morning. She had to go outside. She needed to walk. That got me up and moving. I have horses in my life, and they act as mirrors. And the easiest way I can describe it is that a horse shows you exactly who you are, but minus the stories that you have about yourself.
Ooh, that's powerful. And you just unpacked a lot. And I want to get into the work that you're doing with Fika and the Equine Therapy, but I want to kind of rewind a little bit and talk about, you know, going through the mud of it all and doing the work to heal. Because I think in telling those stories, and you kind of told us a little bit, but like oftentimes we hear these narratives, right? Of like, it was so hard and I got through it and now things are great.
Right.
That's so valid. Like that's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we do get over it. It is just a short moment in our lives, even though it feels so hard while we're going through it, right? But wanting to take time in that moment. And I have a similar situation of dating someone who was living a double life. And when you find out about that and the rug gets pulled up from under you, it's crushing in a different way. Like for to be cheated on is one thing, for things not to work out is another thing, but to have kind of the situation that you thought was not be that, you kind of have to reconcile the history of however long it is that you were in that relationship, but also do the work, at least in my case, do the work to say, why did I miss all the signs? Because they were there. There were signs that were there. And then that kind of catapulted me into this whole digging into childhood trauma and things that I had no clue even existed. Like on the surface, I had a very good childhood and you wouldn't think anything of it. So what was kind of your process or your journey of like doing that work?
Yeah, and you're so right. I just want to touch a little bit upon one thing that you said, was that when someone's living a double life, cheating is a factor, but it is so much more than that. And it's really complicated. And one of the most challenging things, and I'm curious if this was a challenge for you as well, was that everything that I thought was a great experience or a good memory, I had to go back and be like, is that really true? Because when we were at this place or on vacation and what I thought was such a magical experience or a great time, was that really what was happening? And really having to use your word to reconcile that, like, everything that you went through with this person is distorted. So it's not just the betrayal that you're experiencing, it's also the loss of a relationship. And one thing that comes up a lot, I think, you know, you hear from your biggest supporters, like, oh, you know, you're better off, and all those really nice things that they try to say to lift you up. But you're like, but I also didn't stop loving this person. And that is the piece too that I think is so complicated, because yes, logically we know we're better off, right?
Mhm.
But our bodies and our minds are experiencing this huge disconnect from one another, where the emotion is still so strong in the fact that I still loved that person.
Yeah.
And that was really hard to start to unravel and start to let go of. And, you know, I remember somebody saying to me, or asking me the question of, are you dating yet? And it might have been 6 months later or something like that. It had not been all that long. And I said, no, I'm really not ready. And she looked at me and she said, oh, just get over it already. And I was like, you are not me.
Right.
And I'm very careful in the work that I do now to never put a timeline on someone else's grief and on someone else's pain. It
Mhm.
took me almost 5 years to fully feel recovered from that. And that is with intense work. And that's just my timeline. Somebody
Mhm.
else's might be shorter, somebody else's might be longer than that. So I knew right away after that happened, I needed to get supports in place. So thankfully, I was already seeing a therapist for some relationships. To your point, there were signs there, and so I had that in my back pocket, and could continue that. And then it was very serendipitous for me as somebody who grew up riding horses and being around horses. I hadn't been around them in a few years. 2 weeks before I found out my ex was living a double life, I had signed on to lease a horse for the summer.
Mm.
It was at somebody's private home. There was nobody there. And so 3 days a week, I would get to pull into this house and just spend time with this horse. And then, of course, I had my friends and I had, some of my closest family members that were all kind of there for me. One thing that really helped me a lot was having, because of what I did as a school guidance counselor, but also having training in clinical mental health, I had a lot of tools at my disposal already.
Mhm.
And that was really helpful for me, just to have that background and that education and understanding that I knew what my body was going through. I knew what my brain was going through. Doesn't make it easier necessarily, but you have the knowledge and the tools that can be really helpful.
Yeah. I think that that's really important. And for those who don't have the I think it's important to just be able to identify. And I say this all the time, and I'm sure people have heard it, but like, you are not your thoughts. I
Yes.
think that's so crucial and so critical, because it's oftentimes we can associate our being with the things that we're thinking about our lives, or think about ourselves, or the things that we've been told that we are, the labels that have been assigned to us. And so being able to say, I just am, and I get to decide what that am is and what it'll look like in the future, is so important and such an integral part of beginning that journey of healing. And then the other thing I want to call out is just to give yourself grace. Like, I know I said that there is like signs, and there are so many signs, but when you're also in a relationship like this, things are kind of clouded and played in a way that you ignore the signs.
Yep.
And so you mentioned like having to reconcile, or having to look at like all of the memories and say, like, was this true or was it not true? And I look back at my situation and realized that there was a lot of love bombing going on after things had gone wrong. And that's why I was constantly in that loop. And I had no clue, like, the verbiage or anything. Like, I didn't find out like what a narcissist was, or what any of these things were, because I didn't have that background until after I had broken up with that person. And I guess I was Googling other things, and through the power of cookies, YouTube kept recommending that I watch these videos about like, what is a narcissist? And I'm like, fine, I will watch this video because I keep seeing it everywhere. And it sent me down this rabbit hole of discovering, like, okay, this is what I've been through. And so I think it's important to just give yourself that time to
Yeah.
be able to process. And in my experience, it got a lot uglier before it got better, because you're
Yep.
unpacking things that you didn't know were there. Like, it's one thing to say, like, okay, I have to grieve the loss, I have to grieve the cheating, I have to grieve like the double life, even, like, whatever. But then unpacking everything else that comes with that, it takes time. And so just to give yourself grace through that period, I think can be hard because we have to get up, we have to work, we have to make a living for ourselves. But the other side of that healing and the other side of that process is so powerful. So I want to know, was there a time in your journey where you saw kind of like that light at the end of the tunnel, or like, okay, things are good. I'm going through it right now, but I know it will be okay?
I don't know if I had one moment in particular. I think that I knew that I didn't want to feel how I was feeling. And there was, for me, I felt like I was moving through a fog. I mean, for months. And I remember actually the nights were the easiest for me and the mornings were the hardest, because when I got in bed at night, it was like, you did it. Like, you got through another day, and, good for you, and kind of giving myself all the pats on the back and going through my small wins for the day. I remember the grief being so heavy to the point where, like, I would congratulate myself for doing really minor tasks, right? Like emptying the dishwasher or doing a load of laundry, because things that were so easy and so routine all of a sudden felt like these insurmountable tasks that I had to do, and they required so much energy. And the mornings for me were really hard because I'd kind of wake up like, wait a minute, what happened really real? And I'd kind of have to relive the nightmare over again. And that's why I feel like my dog was so instrumental in helping me heal, because she would come and be like, hi, like, I need food and I need to go outside. And it would snap me out of that mindset. And it was like, I have to get up, I have to get going. And I truly believe too, that just movement is so important, not allowing yourself to be in the feelings and grieve. And, I strongly believe in moving through something as opposed to moving around it, avoiding it, ignoring it, pretending like it didn't happen. But I think there's that balance of allowing yourself to sit with what you're going through, but then also finding the inner strength and the motivation to get up and move your body and just move energy, really, no matter what it was that I was capable of doing, right? Sometimes that was just a quick walk. Sometimes I'd be able to get to the gym, and being really mindful about taking inventory of how much I could expend. And I just knew I did not want to feel like that forever. And I was determined to get myself out of it. Right. And I was like downloading, every book on my Kindle about grief, and, just doing things that I knew would feel good, booking a massage, like just little things that I knew, even if they were temporary, that they would help in the healing. Tons of journaling. I mean, just unconscious writing, whatever it was that I felt, just getting everything out, pen to paper, until I didn't need to anymore. Then there was finally a day where I was like, I don't think I need to write about this.
Yeah, I think journaling, and I had forgotten about this, but I have like a journal that I write in. I try to write in every night, but then I bought this notebook for myself that I would just like write things down in. And it was sometimes poems, or other times it was affirmations, and just like pouring into that. And it was such a therapeutic, cathartic experience that taught me a lot. Like when I would go back and like read what I'd written, because a lot of times it was just like a brain dump, of soul dump of just what was on my heart and mind at that moment. And I would have no like conscious awareness of what I was writing until I go back and read it and like, wow, I'm like working through a lot of stuff. So I'm wondering, what did you learn about yourself through your healing journey?
Absolutely. And I think you're so right. There are so many things that we don't even realize that we are writing or getting out, that are kind of between the lines, right? And I know that that's a metaphor, but literally like between the lines of what you're writing. And of course, everyone's going to have a process that works for them. This is the process that worked for me. And I think, what I learned is how insecure I really was, and how willing I was to give up so much of who I am, because I wanted so badly to be in a relationship. I got in the relationship when I was 30. everybody around me was already married, engaged, getting married, starting their families. And I felt the societal pressure to be a part of that. And because of that, I settled for somebody who ultimately, in the end, regardless of what they did, wasn't the right person for me anyway. And I think that's really what I started to learn as I was like, I was somebody who did not, well, I guess I'd put it this way. If I had a t-shirt slogan, it would be "Don't rock the boat."
Mhm.
That's my slogan. Like, it's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal of this. I'm not going to make a mountain out of a molehill. I'll just let it go, let it roll off the back. And I'd get all of this anger or frustration or resentment or whatever the emotion was that would build and build and build and build. And I can think about this going back to times that I was in elementary school, middle school, high school with friends too, things that upset me, that bothered me, and I would never say anything. And then all of a sudden I would explode, and it would seemingly come out of nowhere. And so one of the things that I learned about myself through the grieving process and the healing process was like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to sit back and not voice what I want, who I am, what I stand for. And it doesn't have to be aggressive, right? It's just a sort of like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is how I want to be treated. These are things that are acceptable to me, and these are things that are not. And that is what I started to learn the most about myself. I didn't even know, Jocelyn, what those things were. I didn't know what was acceptable to me and what was not.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how we come to those conclusions. For me, I realized like from a very early age that, I was taught to, sit and stay in my place and do these things. And so you kind of carry those onward.
Yeah.
And I was doing that in friendships and relationships. And a lot of times I felt like I didn't really have a voice. And then when I found it kind of like, I'm going to tell you what I want, and what I don't want. And I was like, it was like very like sassy and aggressive. And that's not who I was either. Like, I'm a lover, I'm not a fighter. And so I felt like, I found this voice, and now I have to like be this person. I have to stick up for myself. But what does that look like? And so for a while, it was like two ends of the spectrum. Either you stick up for yourself and you say all the things and it just is what it is, or, you lie down and you take it. And so I feel like now I've kind of found this happy medium, but it's come through doing the work. And a part of your work, which has become your work, right?
Yeah.
Is Equine Therapy. So tell me about that summer when you signed up to ride and visit with that horse, and how that turned into the coaching business that you have today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just make one clarification. I do equine coaching as a coach. So just to make people aware that, because the modalities are different. So I had left, of course, the job that I was let go from, and had gone into the health and wellness industry. My family actually owns a multi-purpose health club, and I had an opportunity, and it just made sense at the time. And I really liked it, and I enjoyed being there. It was a place I grew up at, and I had this opportunity to learn a whole different side of a business, which was marketing and advertising. And so the learning curve was steep, which was exciting at the time because I was very busy. And about 5-6 years in, when I was in this relationship, it was starting to feel a little stale to me anyway. And the guy that I was seeing was in a job where he was about to be transferred for work. And I kind of was like, ooh, this is like my out, right? Like, I'm going to go with him. Doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing where my parents are going to try to keep me there because, I'm going with my person. And then that all blew up before I could make my exit. But even before that, I was thinking about how I could go back to helping people. Did I want to go back into schools, or, maybe start a private practice as a therapist? And so when everything blew up, that took a back seat. And that's what I mean when I said, like, I'm going to stay put. And just at that point, I'd been there, like I said, 6 years, and everything was very routine. So it wasn't a whole lot of energy or effort that I needed to expend. And so instead of being like, I'm running off and I'm moving and I'm getting a new job, it was just like, just stay put, focus on what you can do. And so when I would go and spend time with this horse, she just had this way of looking at me where some days she was like, I would say she's like a Sour Patch Kid. Like some days she was so sweet and she'd like hang her head on my shoulder and we would just kind of be together. And then other days, I swear, it was like she would look at me and like be like, get your shit together. Like, I'm not taking this today. Like, let's go. So like, she kind of had this ability to kind of light this fire under me. And growing up with horses, you know, I've been around them now for over 30 years. And I always knew about equine therapy, different modalities of it. And I was thinking like, gosh, between my dog and this horse, I really think there's something here. Like I am learning something about myself in a very different and unique way that I'm not getting in an office setting. And so I just started playing with the idea of like, wow, what if I could go back to helping people, but do it through nature and do it through animals and horses specifically. And I started making some calls, some people that I knew and a girl that I grew up riding with, and she was doing this coaching work. And so I told her what happened to me. I hadn't spoken to her in years. And she was like, come down and visit me. It was the middle of January. It was like 20 degrees outside. I didn't care. We sat in a field with her 3 horses and talked for 2 hours. And I was like, this is the best I have felt since everything turned upside down. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And so I found a coaching program that I enrolled in, did that, you know, I'm kind of fast forwarding here. You know, the program was about 1.5 years and, you know, I'm still in my same job, but just building things behind the scenes. And there comes a point too where, and this is a lot of the clients that I see now as well, is that they've been in traditional talk therapy for quite some time and they feel a little bit stuck or things feel a little bit stagnant there. And they may feel like they're not really moving forward enough in a way that they would like to. And so they start to seek alternative supports that could help them. And that's how I felt about what I was experiencing for myself. And with equine therapy, it can be very specific. So you can have programs for adults for PTSD, for really significant trauma, for addiction. We hear a lot of things about horses working with veterans or even with inmates and all of that work, which is really intense. And that's really specific populations. For kids, you know, there's things like working with children with autism, helping children who maybe aren't, you know, emotionally regulated, and you need like a physician's referral. And it can be really difficult to get into some of these programs because they just don't have the time or they don't have the space because they're just flooded with people who, you know, really need their services. And what I was thinking, and I was like, well, what about the person like me, right? Or like, what about the person like you who's really high functioning? You're going through something really challenging, but you're still able to get up and function in the world every day. And I was like, I don't feel like something like that exists. And so I'm going to create it. And that's what I did.
I love that. And it's true. I want to talk a bit about that like high functioning piece, because oftentimes I feel like that's the subset of the population who goes through their stuff and like suffers in silence.
Right.
Because you feel like you don't have a place to say anything because from the outside looking in, things look great. And so you like keep up this facade and don't really do anything about it. So tell me how equine therapy helps people stop suffering in silence and really get the help that they need.
Yeah. So you're talking about my work specifically. Yeah. So with the coaching, I think one of the biggest differences, right, is therapy kind of really looks at where you've been, and the coaching really helps where you're going. So clients of mine are welcome to talk about their past histories, but we don't need to delve that deep unless they want to. And so we're really looking at where are they right now and where do they want to go? And where the horses really come into play is, like I mentioned earlier, is that they have this ability to mirror you. And they do actually have mirror neurons, and we do too, but horses have them like tenfold. And it teaches people so many different things about themselves, but I'll give you an easy example, right? So I said earlier, they have this ability to mirror you minus the stories that you feel about yourself. So you come to the farm, I'm just using you as an example, and you're like, I really want the horses to like me, right? And maybe the horse walks past you and doesn't stop and say hi to you. And now all of a sudden you're feeling rejected and you're feeling like the horse doesn't like you, right? And I get to say, he's just going to get a drink of water. And so it stops you in your tracks and going like, oh my God, I just literally started creating this whole story in my head about how this horse doesn't like me, when in reality, he's just over there getting a drink of water.
Yeah.
So it can be really simple things like that, but I pay really close attention to when people project their own emotions and their own stories onto the horse. He hates me. He's mad at me. My horse is a male, so I'm saying, he a lot, but, oh, I think he's upset. Okay. How do you know he's upset? And then they're like, I don't. Right. So it gives you all of these moments to unpack where that's coming from. And especially like boundaries is a good example as well. I can do something as simple as, ask the horse to back up. Right. And you hear it in the tone. Oh, back up. Can you please back up? All right, come on, we can do this. And I'm like, is that how you talk to your kids at home? Like, is that effective? Who's putting the dishes away at the end of the night? You or the kids? They're like, me. And it's like, right. Like, and so it gives me an opportunity to teach what I say is, of course, I'm drawing a blank on my own phrase right now, which is firm but fair. Firm but fair.
Yeah.
Right. And it gives you this opportunity to let go of some of these projected feelings, because you're not making the horse feel bad. In fact, you're actually establishing better trust and better respect. The horse likes when you communicate clearly. What they don't like is incongruence, right? So what you're feeling inside doesn't match your intention.
Yeah.
So you could think in your head all you want back up, but if your body language isn't saying it, and if you're not cueing what you actually want, my horse isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I think that that's so powerful. And I'm like hating right now that I'm allergic to horses. I'm like, I'm going to do this. But I think it goes to show how that plays out in human relationships as well, right? Because we experience so much friction when either the individuals around us or us in and of ourselves are, either too afraid to voice what we need, or are thinking one thing and saying another. Yes. And regardless, you can feel that energy. We feel that energy. So how do we get to a point of taking what we've learned in coaching and applying that to our lives and being able to speak up and advocate for ourselves and be firm but fair?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I have my clients do, and I always say to them, I said, hey, listen, you can't take him home with you. You can't take me home with you. Only you can implement this. So we're kind of like the practice ground, because the horses don't have judgments. Right. They might react to something they don't like, but they're not going to say, hey, you did that wrong. You did that the wrong way, or I didn't like that, and you're terrible. And, just however your relationships are at home, or what you even think about yourself, right? Your relationship with yourself, maybe some of those thoughts are running through your own head. The horse is always going to do what he thinks you're asking. So if your mind is saying back up, but you're communicating move sideways, the horse is going to move sideways. So it gives people this opportunity in real time to really practice how to be clear with how they communicate, how they set boundaries, so that they can better do that at home. And what horses also really love is when you pause. Right? Some of it's timing. Eventually, as you advance and, do different exercises with the horses, you need to have a little bit more quick timing with things. But when you're first learning, it's okay to pause. It's okay to reset. It's okay to take your time to think things through and set that intention. So what I love for people to do is, I'm like, on your drive home, even if you cannot put music on for 10 minutes, don't call someone, don't text someone right away. Let what you just experienced actually integrate into your body, so that the next time you come up against something or rub up against something at home, at work, with your friends, your significant other, your children, that you can remember this moment of saying like, okay, pause, think about how I want to communicate, and then practice everything that we're learning on the farm so that hopefully you can implement it into your real life.
Yeah. I love that moment of pause and integration.
Yeah.
Because usually we just go. Like, done with coaching, got to go pick up the kids, got to go do this, do that. And we're not really paying attention to the present moment.
Yes.
And if we aren't present for the here and now, the present moment just becomes a projection of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that integration work, by being very intentional about the moment, the conversation, the communication, the experience, like what we're experiencing,
Yeah.
we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of our futures. And it's so seldom that we own that opportunity. But it's
Absolutely.
that pause and that integration.
And the
That can,
being present. That
yeah.
is so key when you're working with a horse. I don't work with kids anymore. I did for a short time, but I was working with a kid a few years ago, and she was doing an exercise with him where horses, when you move them, you actually move them from behind. So when you drive a horse forward, you actually want to be at their hind end, not at the front. And so she was doing an exercise where she was kind of moving him in a circle. And all of a sudden he kind of went off on his, on his own. And I said, what happened? She said, he unplugged. And I was like, did he unplug or did you unplug? And she said, I unplugged. And I just loved that because I felt like it's just so relevant to our world of technology. But they pick up on that. When you lose the presence with them, when you disconnect, they disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And it really teaches people how focused you have to be. Even today, I was working with somebody who was doing an exercise called lunging, which if you're in the equine world, this is a very simple exercise, but for someone who's never done it before, it can be really challenging. And every time she couldn't get him to go around in a full circle without him stopping, without him going in a different direction. And it's the same concept, what's happening. And it's like, my mind went in a different direction. And so you can see where your brain starts to take over and interrupt and get you in those negative thought loops. And just by doing something where you have to be present and you have to focus can just help you so much start to rewire those neural networks. And the other really big piece that I think makes working with animals so unique is that their nervous system is way larger than ours. And larger nervous systems have the ability to affect smaller ones. So if you're not somebody who's fearful and you like nature and you like horses, people come to the farm, the minute they step foot out of their car, it's like, I feel better. And they don't know why. And I'm like, because you're in nature, you're around animals, and those larger nervous systems help re-regulate your own. And when you say like, we're go, 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 we're go, 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 it's like, yeah, we're not meant to run on that much adrenaline all day long. We're not meant to be in a state of fight or flight all day long. And one beautiful thing that horses teach us is about being over doing.
I love that. And I always say, like, we're human beings, not human doing. So just be able to sit back and experience what it is that the present moment is offering. And I want to get some tips from you because you have so much knowledge about the work that you do with the horses, but also just in your interactions with humans. So for those who maybe don't have access to equine therapy, what daily self-care tips or rituals can we integrate into our lives to be more fulfilled and more present?
Absolutely. I am a huge proponent of walking, whether you have a dog to walk or not. And I think each thing that I'm going to recommend is very personal. So I'm going to go from what I know that I love and that I recommend. Movement, right? And it doesn't always have to be strenuous, but allowing yourself to just be outside, walk. If you can get to a trail, if you can get to the beach, if you're near one, if you can get to a body of water specifically, there are such calming elements about that. And then if you're outside and you're walking, try to look up. We have a tendency to look down all the time. And sometimes that's because you don't want to trip and fall, depending on where you are. But there can be so much that you will miss if you don't look up. I was walking in Vermont in the fall, and had I not been looking up, I would not have spotted an owl that was sitting in a tree.
Yeah.
That's just like magical, amazing. And there's something about just allowing yourself to enjoy being outside. You know, you can be listening to your favorite music, or you can be listening to a podcast or not. When I walk, I actually don't do anything. I like to be present with my surroundings. So that's one thing. I walk every single day, 2 miles minimum, up to 5. So if you have the time, if you can only have 5 minutes, just go sit outside for 5 minutes. Just get outside. It's a very long-winded way of saying get outside if you can. Right. And if you're in a city, if you're in an urban setting, trying to go find a green space to sit in for, you know, like I said, 5-10 minutes, maybe you can bring a book with you or go get your favorite coffee and just kind of be in that space. So that would be one. Journaling, as we spoke about, I think is a phenomenal practice. Doesn't have to be pages and pages a night. One thing that I did when I was going through my grieving process was write down at the end of each day 3 things that I accomplished that day and 3 things I would like to accomplish tomorrow. The key words there being would like to. So I'm not setting myself up for failure. So that's a big one, right? So attainable goals. If you're somebody who's going through it right now, give yourself attainable goals. Once you feel like you can do that, then start pushing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. But what I see happen too much or too often is people setting these really high goals for themselves, and they're not able to even take one step forward. So maybe that is going to your favorite class at the gym, right? And just saying like, okay, I'm going to try to make that class tomorrow, right? You're already kind of in that routine, and it's just giving yourself that extra little nudge to get back there. What other tools? Meditating. For me, I like movement when I meditate. So like I said before, I'm going to say this like 1,000 times, I like to walk. To me, that's a moving meditation. I'm not somebody who likes to sit and breathe that way. Doesn't work for me. So if you're somebody who's like, maybe I should start meditating, like maybe I should start breathing, just know that it's okay to do it differently. You can also lie down. Like that was one thing I started doing when I was doing meditation was I was like, I don't want to sit. I want to do this, but I'd rather lay down. So I would lay down on my yoga mat, like kind of in Shavasana, you know, I'd put a warm blanket on me and breathe and listen to the meditations. And that just worked better for me. So I think sometimes when we're giving tools, it's a little bit about bending the rules to find what works best for you.
I love that. Like we can take the framework and make it our own.
Yes.
And really intentional about like, okay, this is a great tool. It seems like it works. I want to try it, but this is what I need. Because I lay down when I meditate too. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, right. It's better.
They say that that's a huge no-no. And I'm like, it's yes. It's a yes for me. So one of the other things that are a huge yes at confidence conversations are positive affirmations. So I would love to get 3 positive affirmations from you to help us live a more confident life.
Oh gosh. Okay. 3 positive affirmations. One, I think, is going to be in all aspects of your life with yourself and with others and experiences, be firm but fair with what you want. Be firm and fair with what you want. I would say it's not so much a positive affirmation, but get really familiar with your values. And then once you have them, state them so that becomes your positive affirmation, right? So for me, my top 3 values are authenticity, communication, and connection. So saying something like, I am authentic, I am a great communicator, and I am fabulous at connecting with other beings. So really discovering those core values for yourself and turning those into a statement so that you can keep building upon those and be really confident in your values and who you are. So that would be another one. And then I'm going to do something a little off the cuff.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. I don't know how like into mystical and energy and things.
I'm so woo. Let's go.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is ask my horse if he has one that he would like to share.
Okay.
Because I have an ability to, this is something we did not touch on, but one of my gifts is being able to communicate as an animal communicator with my horse. In the sense that he gives me messages for the client's highest and best.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to tune in for a second and see if he has anything that he wants to share, because he's a little bit wiser than I am.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
So the first part that's coming through is life is about walking with and alongside yourself. Each journey is your own, and it is important to know who you are so that you can carry yourself forward in a way that is best for you. So let me see if I can turn that into an affirmation. The affirmation that I'm getting is, today I am going to walk and stand tall and carry my confidence forward out into the world to be exactly who I am meant to be.
Leah.
I can't come up with that shit on my own, Jocelyn.
Oh, this was such a beautiful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you. We could talk for hours.
Oh, we definitely could.
Yeah.